What is going on, everybody? My name is JJ. I am one of your hosts of the Indie Inkwell, a podcast dedicated solely to indie comic books. And this is my co-host right here, the man, the myth, the legend, Longbox Entertainment. What is up,
Hello,
my
my
guy?
fellow comic lovers.
That was a very elegant intro.
Well, thank you, JJ.
Oh man. So we've got a really good episode for you guys today. But before we get into that, we wanted to go ahead and get this sponsor read out of the way so that we can get into the action and into the stories and into our guest today. So, real quick, guys, if you saw the shirt I was wearing yesterday with the nice flashy owl on it. I don't know if you saw that or not, Longbox, because you were absent for the beginning of
I
last
was.
episode. But they also offer these basic tees here. The company is called Into the AM, and they're a team of artists and creators with a shared vision, seeing clothing as a canvas to express yourself and what drives you. So they've been doing this since like 2012. They really want, people to be able to express whatever fandom or hobby or lifestyle that they choose through their clothing. And the artists are all independent artists. It's all done through, look at the sales, man. 3-pack graphic tees for $61.95. You cannot really beat that. Like I said, they've also got basic stuff. And if you're one of those people who likes to stock up and save, they have even bigger bundle packs. They have simple basic tees, they have hoodies and much more. But what really sold me, like I said, was the selection of graphic tees because, us comic book nerds, we like pretty things, we like great artwork, and this is something that you can do that with. You can get these shirts super cheap. If you go to a convention or any kind of clothing store, you're going to be paying like $25, $35 for shirts like this each, but you're getting 3 for the price of 2 basically right here. So if you guys want to check that out and help support the show and help this community grow, you can go over to intotheam.com/JJ Comics to get 10% off of your first order. And if you don't want to do that, you can just go to their website and enter the promo code JJ Comics for 10% off your order. There is a link down in the description below. Thank you, Into the AM, for supporting the podcast and helping support the independent comic book community.
Woo woo.
Now, with all of that out of the way, let's bring in our guest, the true man of the hour, Mr. Jon Clark, comic book writer, illustrator, Scout Comics, Bite-Sized Tales of Terror. Man, let's get into it. How are you doing today?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good, good. So before we get into the book, I want to kind of get your origin story, man. And kind of introduce yourself to everybody. How did you get into comic books in general, or just the nerd culture in general? Not everybody started at comic books. I've interviewed a lot of people that have started like Power Rangers. One person said that was their entryway to nerddom, and then boom, they're making their own comic books 20 years later.
Yeah. No, well, it was my brother. I have an older brother. He's like 6 years older than I am, and he could drive when I was much younger. And back then, he would go to all the different like convenience stores around in our area because they didn't have like a comic book store. So we would go and kind of raid the little racks that they had to see, and you could get 2 months old. You never knew what it was going to be. It was kind of like, prospecting for gold. And that was the start of it for me. Like he would read them and I would get them handed down to me. And I've always kind of been a horror fan. And I remember in his room, he had this drawer on the bottom of his dresser, and it would just be like where you put stuff, and it would have like collections of stuff. And one time I was going through his stuff because when you're the younger brother, that's what you do. And I found he had like a Famous Monsters of Filmland, the one that had Alien on the cover. And I was just like hooked on it. I just thought it was so amazing. And then, of course, around that time, because I'm older, like all the Friday the 13th movies was like a huge thing. And this is like when I'm in elementary school and stuff. And all the kids, I was a little too young to see them, and so were some of my friends. But they would come in and we would talk about it, and it would be like, they'd say, "Oh, did you see that scene where this was happening and all that? And the girl was eating the banana," and it was.
Getting all your friends in
Uh,
trouble at school, going home, telling their parents, "Look, guess what I heard at school today."
right.
Absolutely. But it was, everybody was kinda into it and people, just really enjoyed it, It was that was a good time. It was a good time. But I've always really liked that, and I kinda went, my kind of history with it is I've gone back and forth. Like, I started as wanting to work in comics. When I was a kid, I wanted to work in comics. And then when I went to college, I realized, like, I wanna work in film because, like, I've always wanted to create creatures and monsters, like, that's something I've always done, and I thought, "I'm gonna be a special effects artist," like, that's what I thought I would do, and I used to draw all that stuff and build sculptures and do things, um, and then I kinda did that for a while, and then it kinda went back to, I wanna make comics again, so it's kinda like this weird I kinda bounce back and forth between the 2, and I'm getting that itch to make films again now.
Shoot, why not both?
Exactly, I agree. That's what I'm gonna try to do. I'm trying to do both. But comics is a little easier, you don't have to, spend all this money as much in comics as you do when you're making films.
True, true, true,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, I can
Mm.
imagine it's a little bit cheaper to create a comic book than it is to do, like, a movie.
Yes, it is. It very much is. Trust me on that.
Facts. Facts. So
Yeah.
you've always been like a horror fan, basically.
Yes.
Because I know you mentioned Friday the 13th. Fun fact, actually, this past spooky season, me and my wife, we finally like watched all the Friday the 13th movies, and
Oh, wow.
we also watched all the Nightmare on Elm Street, and then we
Nice.
ended it with Freddy versus Jason, right? So it was like this whole
Oh,
Oh,
thing,
that's a
right?
good way to do
nice.
it.
Oh
That is a
yes,
cool way to do it.
and like man, like going back and like watching those movies, you see like the cheesiness that like slashers are known for, right? But then there's also moments of like, wow, like that was actually something interesting that they did there,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like, even like the backstory of like Jason. I never knew the whole thing, with Pamela Voorhees and all that stuff. I
Uh-huh,
I
uh-huh.
never did. I didn't even know Jason wasn't even the killer in the first one. Oh, spoiler
Right.
alert!
Oh, yeah,
Spoiler alert!
spoiler alert.
If nobody know that, but but yeah, so like that really like blew my mind. So like, what were some of your favorite horror franchises that inspired Bite Size? Because I can definitely see some Tales from the Crypt kind of
Yes.
influences.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
just wanted to know.
Yeah, huge. I was a huge fan of Tales from the Crypt, and, like, around the time I was in high school, they were reprinting them, and I would buy, like, all those issues because obviously I'm old, but I'm not that old, but I would get, the reprints, and, the guy that I loved was, Ghastly Cram Engels was, like, my hero because he would do, like, the dripping, like, people's screams would be, like, dripping and all that stuff, and I just thought that was just the best, like I really liked the way he would design stuff like that. So that was definitely an influence. And it's kind of funny, like recently, I feel like I've been going back, and I would recommend you guys if you haven't already. I've been reading a lot of the old Clive Barker stories, like, and I don't know if you guys have
Ah.
seen them, but back like in the I want to say late '90s, a bunch of comic book publishers put out his stories, and a lot of them are really nicely illustrated, and they're like his short stories in comic book form. And I mean, obviously, I love the
Oh,
books, but
wow.
yeah, it's really cool. And I always feel like I want to I really enjoy that Vertigo time, with the horror comics kind of really like, when Sandman was out and Hellblazer and all that stuff. And I like that. I want to bring that back. And like I feel like, the
Yes.
stories that I do, I want to kind of have that. I want to give horror like a, like a place where you can kind of go to different and unique stories, like if you're getting kind of tired of the superhero stuff and you want to kind of try some horror stuff. Like I like that and I think it's cool, and I'm very thankful to Scout for actually, kind of taking that journey with me and, kind of saying, let's go for it because, I don't think I do a lot of stuff that's maybe like a one shot, or it'll be like 3 issues or 4 issues or short stories even, and like I think it's nice because it's good to experiment with that, and then, you
Mhm.
know, readers don't have to like, you know, if they're not excited by it, hey, it was one comic, and you know they can enjoy it, or they can, you know, they cannot.
Right. Well, and it gives
Hopefully
you
they do.
kind of like a test market, kinda see which ideas work real well and that you might wanna expand on later.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And yeah, so like I do have stuff that I would love to do longer form, but it's just when you're independent like I am, it's harder to kind of afford to sustain that
Mhm.
kind of a thing. So I like to kind of, and I also feel like my brain kind of works in shorter chunks sometimes, and it's kind of like a shame that you know you know, like it's like a comic is like 22 pages, you know, and sometimes you're like, you know, you only write an 18-page story, and sometimes you write a 4-page story. So it is like I said, I'm very thankful that Scout was like able to, with this comic, say, yeah, 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 you know, make it as long as you want, make it as short as you want. You know, that made me feel really
Yeah,
good.
no, the people over at Scout Comics are great. I've interviewed quite a few creators that have published books through them, and they everybody I talk to that does work with them says they're great.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
And they're
And
really, really supportive of, like, unique ideas that are real different.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of them coming up for them. So like I've been getting these really weird ideas recently, and I'm like, you know, I've never seen that done in a comic book. So I'm like,
hey,
I'm gonna try it, and we'll see if they say no, then they say no, you
Right,
know.
and Nerdtween asks, "Did you ever think about self-publishing?"
I have, but I think the reason that I don't do it is because I'm lazy, and like I've heard like, you know, like the Kickstarter. I think Kickstarter is a wonderful thing, you know,
Mhm.
and I it works for a lot of people. But my thing is like I don't know if I want that many comics that I have to kind of sort through and ship out, and I'm lazy that way. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
don't want to have all that, like have a truckload, you know, sitting behind me, and like I have to go through each one and separate them and put. But I more power to the people that do that. You know, it's just that I'm lazy. You know.
hey, man, at least you know yourself. You know, that's a part of the process. You got to
Self-awareness
know.
is highly underrated these days. Like
Exactly.
But that
Exactly.
being said, maybe tomorrow, you know, if Scout says we're not publishing that story, then maybe I will, and I change everything I just said.
Right.
That's true. That's true. You know, one thing I would have to say, like, especially from reading bite size, I'm mostly like a collected editions type of comic buyer and reader, as you can probably
I
see.
was gonna say, as you can see from the wall behind him.
And I really and I think the reason why I am like that, because I like to have a full story. You know, usually in like single issues, you have to wait, 6 months to have like the full storyline, right?
Mhm.
And the
Yeah,
thing I really like about Bite Size, the fact that it's an anthology and you have all these different little tiny stories, but good thing that you have a beginning, middle, and end to all those stories. And even when the stories end vaguely, I love that because then me as the reader, I can kind of make up in my head, oh my gosh, what happened next? Like what happened to this character, you know? And I really like that.
thank you, thank you, thank you for that.
I really like that.
It is. It's basically set up to make you develop your own kinda headcanon for it, like
Mhm. Well, I've even talked to the editor there that because I have these other ideas that are like, you know, it's a one shot, and I like that. You know, I like you say, I like to read a full story in
Mhm.
one go. You know, and I feel like a lot of the like even you know the ones I really like Alan Moore when he was doing Swamp Thing. There's a lot of issues that you could read. Like, yes, it's wonderful to read the full arc, but you could have picked up like an issue and been pretty like you got a pretty solid story in there, even though it was part of a grander scheme, you know. And even like the Hellblazers I was talking about earlier, same thing. Like you could get, you know, they would do like a 4-issue storyline or a 6-issue storyline, but there were a few issues that were just single little stories that took place within that world that were fantastic. And like, you know, I enjoy that, and we've had discussions like if I continue to do like single issue books, and you know I'm not always going to do that, I but I'm enjoying it right now, and it's like later we could collect them, and it might be nice to do like a Jon Clark craziness, like collection or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, you would definitely have a buyer for me, you know.
Oh, thank you, thank you for that.
So before we start showing a little bit of the artwork, I do want to go ahead and give everybody a little bit of a trigger warning, just in case you are sensitive to sort of disturbing images. Then you might want to go ahead and skip away or come back later, or maybe just skip this episode because we don't want to upset anybody. It's nothing horrible, but it is a bit much for some people, I think. And once in a while, we do like to go ahead and give a big red spoiler warning to make sure nobody misses anything or gets anything ruined for them. So, okay, let's go into this, man, because this artwork is insane. Like, I love this.
Thank you.
It's definitely bone chilling. Like, I I've read this twice. So I read it last weekend for the first time, and I read it at night, right? So I'm already in that like that spooky like vibe, right? And then just like it's eerie, like especially that second story. That second story
Oh, cool.
with the duct tape, that
Yeah,
freaked me out, man. Because I'm just like, this can actually happen. Like someone could do this if they're crazy enough. They can go get tape and like Christmas lights, and
yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
make it happen.
It's funny you just say that. I do try, like, even though a lot of my stories are way out there, I do try to keep them grounded in a reality where it's like, it's possible. Like there's
Mhm.
always like that, like, we don't know everything. Like we as human beings don't know everything. And it's like, it's possible that this could happen. And like I feel thank you for saying that because I like and it's funny when I wrote that story, I wrote it as like a short little story and I let a friend of mine read it and I thought it was okay. And she was kind of like, this thing with the duct tape is horrible, like that's so horrible, and I was kind of like, gosh, yeah, it is. That really is horrible.
It definitely is because I was just thinking like, imagine like if this guy were to, somehow survive out of this, like taking this duct tape off, and like the part where he's like, maybe like doctors can like soak me into something,
Yeah.
like it would
Uh-huh.
hurt. And I'm thinking about his hair, and like, oh
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
it's just,
Oh, well, and then if you wanna like, this right here played on this story played on one of my own personal phobias of, like, foreign objects inside the body, like,
Uh,
oh my
yes,
gosh. Like,
yes,
would I
yes.
say it has been a long time since a horror comic actually, like, disturbed me a little?
yay, yay. And I win. I win.
Yes.
Yes. Oh man. So like,
So kind of like break down like kind of the inspiration behind each story. Like, is this like are these concepts you kind of came up with on your out of the top of your head, or are these kind of things
Yeah.
you kind of heard about somewhere and kind of threw your own twist on?
So one of the things I've gotten into recently when I've been writing stories and coming up with stories is like like in horror, in traditional horror, and we were talking about Friday the 13th, great example. It's all about like the women, being scared, and
Mhm.
like the guy is coming after the woman. And that's a huge trope that has been going on for years. And it's exciting and fun and all that. But I got into this idea about like I want to see stories for men where men are like, and I'm like, and one of the things I felt like with comics that, it's hard to kind of like you can't do a jump scare horror, you can't do that kind of a thing with
Yeah.
comics. But what you can do, and what I try to do is get under your skin, like and like so like
Quite
for the
literally.
yes.
yes, yeah, yes, exactly, and like I wanted to kind of merge that idea about like men feeling safe and feeling like that they're the sexual domineering one, and then just turn all that on its head and make it like a man like that's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And
Because
that's
his night started off great,
yeah,
great,
yeah,
and just for it to be like ruined just by something that started off so small. And it also, now when I think about it, I guess I've always like grown up as like a horror fan because I remember those books, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, right?
Yes, of
Oh,
course.
yes.
And there was always this one. It was called, I think, The Spot, with the girl that had like the zit, and she like popped it, and like all these spiders came out, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Ugh.
So so initially reading this story, I was like, oh, okay, this seems familiar. There's probably gonna be like a bunch of stuff that's gonna crawl out of him or something. And then when he took it off and it was like a necklace, and then creepy lady, I was like, whoa, this surprised me, right? I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, I thought it was one thing, and it's almost like you played off of like a cliche and
Mhm.
then 180, and I have to applaud you on that. I have to applaud you.
Thank you, thank you. And same thing kind of for the second story. You know, I wanted to kind of make it unclear about, is she crazy or are they actually talking to her? You know, and it's like I wanted to kind of play that game, and like you say at the end, kind of leave it up to the viewer. You know what's really going on, and I just I like the idea of also taking the character who you think is the weak one, even though she may not be, and turning it around on, the man in that particular story. And then I guess I for the third one, so I was watching like this nature show, like one of those Richard Attenborough ones or something like that.
Mhm.
And they were talking about these bees that like mate and like just, I mean, it's like devastation of like killing each other for the queen bee to mate, and just it's insane. And I'm like, I was riveted. Like I was just kind of not paying attention, working in the corner, and my son was watching this, and I started to watch it, and I'm like, wow, what if that happened with humans, like, and then I just had that idea about, I wanted to put it in. I don't know what kind of jobs you guys have had, but if you've ever worked in like a corporate world, when you have these conference rooms and you have these meetings in the conference rooms, and I thought like, wouldn't it be wonderful to have, a conference meeting that just goes to
Just
that level
completely
of
turns
the
into a
bees.
melee.
Where
Yeah, yeah.
turn something so mundane and then you bring into the fantastical, right? And actually, you kind of like answered one of my questions that I had written down because I was gonna ask you like the whole bees thing. Like, did you see that somewhere, or like was that something made up?
Yes.
And the fact that you did see that, I was like, because it the explanation for it, I bought it. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, this seems about right, you know?
Yeah. No, there are bees. They're actually the bees. I think I even named them correctly in the story too. Yeah, they're bees like in Australia, and like, yeah, they're it's insane. And
That is
I don't know.
wild.
And I also like the fact of, like I was saying about trying to get under people's skin. And I don't know if it worked or not, but for me in that story in particular, the horror is, and like if you've been in that kind of a setting or any kind of a, social interaction setting, there's little taboos where, you don't do. And
Yeah.
like, the idea of the men like taking her hand and being, you know, like, really, doing these things that like you're sitting there going like, awkward, this is really
Right.
cringy, and I don't
Right,
know, and then just taking that and just keep turning, that up and up and up. Because, if you've ever sat in one of those meetings, like, can you imagine if something like that happened? You would be like,
man.
no.
The trauma,
Oh
emotional
my god.
emotional damage, man.
Oh, I wish we had
For
that
real.
sound
Oh man, yeah. That
No,
one,
but, like, if you were aiming for disturbing, you nailed it with all 3 of these.
Nice.
Now,
Cool,
with
cool.
the foreign object one, where did that come from? That would because that it seemed familiar to me almost, like I had seen a similar story told somewhere, but I couldn't quite picture it
I hope
where.
not. Jeez, I hope not. But I don't know, like
Maybe it was just like a similar concept somewhere or something, I'm not sure.
I think I just, I was trying to think about that actually the other day, like where that story kind of came from. But I feel like part of it is, when you get older, you like notice like, I have a weird something on my arm. Like, what is this weird thing? And it's
Mhm.
sometimes it's just natural, whatever, like a mole that you didn't have yesterday or something like that. And then and I just wanted to kind of push that. And then, in my head, I was thinking like, well, what if there's something under there? And like I wear a necklace and I kind of had the idea of like, well, what if there was like and I call her like a witch type of a creature that wanted a mate, and wanted somebody that they could have, and like how could they cast a spell on them? And I just thought, the best way to do it was to do it in a way, if you put like a necklace on them, they're going to see it and be like, what's this weird necklace on me? But
Right.
if it's unseen and they accidentally just discover it one day and it becomes like, what the hell is going on with me? And then kind of play that idea out until they kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah, because the biggest question about it in my head that popped up was like, so how'd she get it in there in the first place then? In
Right.
her, like, original form, like, because
Yeah.
wouldn't he have noticed her looking all, like, demonic or,
True.
like,
See.
what
Well, that
happened
that
there?
was
Like
well, the idea is that the necklace keeps him from seeing the truth, and then when it's
Right.
off, and I actually I was gonna put that character in a larger kind of story and make him the framework, and the idea would be you see him later and he's looking, he's kind of like one of those, you think he's crazy because he's wearing like the aluminum foil hats and doing all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff, and then you see that like he has crisscrosses all over his chest from like, years of her planting, him finding it, her planting, like, so it becomes this
Gee,
nightmare that he can never
Oh
escape from.
man.
that's insane.
Ah, bless
I
his heart.
love it.
Bless his heart. And I'm not gonna lie, it felt so like relatable in a way, because like the way he was just like, all right, just rip it off, like like
And
I'm
it
just gonna
just
work
kept
through the
going.
pain, and it just kept going. He's like, oh no, like
Like, have you ever,
oh
sat
man,
there and, like, picked at, like, a hangnail or something, and the skin just
Yeah.
kinda kept going and you thought it was never gonna stop?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
hey,
It's that,
yes,
and I, there is something, I'm terrified by like body horror, like any little
Yeah.
thing that goes wrong with me, and I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, why is this on
man,
me?
yes. Yes, the fact that the first thing he was like, "Oh, is this cancer?"
Yeah,
Like that's something that I feel like everyone like that. What that thought would go through their head, you know?
Mhm.
Ah,
yeah, yeah.
this is just amazing. This is and then your art, right? Who who influenced like your art style, right? Who are some of the artists that you're like, I really like their art, so I kind of want to incorporate it like a little bit of what they did, because your art is very unique,
Thank you.
but it's just it's nice. It kind of reminds me of Jock. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
the
of course.
artist Jock.
Hmm.
Um, but then it's creepier. Like even now, like talking about it, and I'm seeing these images again. Like I'm getting goosebumps. Not even gonna lie.
Cool.
Not even gonna lie.
I'm so my favorite, and I kind of say he is like the like so like Dave McKean is, I don't know if you know who he is. He's my absolute hero, and like he did Batman
Arkham Asylum.
Arkham Asylum, and that for me is like I got that book when I was a kid, and it's like the Bible as far as I'm concerned. Like that's the Bible, and I'm not trying to compare myself to him, but I aspire like to him, to that level, because I feel like he's on a level that nobody else is on, and we're all just walking around.
You talk about creepy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Un- Unsettling. Yes.
and
That's definitely David.
that's what I want. That's what I go for. I don't. I rarely get there, but I really try to like get as close as I can to that.
Well, and, like, even with, like, the quote unquote "gory" bits, it's not, like, gore for gore's sake. It's not overdone. I mean, I was gonna say tasteful, but for the genre, it is very tasteful. How's that?
Cool.
Like
Yeah, I don't know if you guys should check out some of my other stuff if you haven't seen it. Like, I don't did you see Something Juicy? I don't know if you had a chance to read
No,
that
I
one
did
yet.
not get a chance to look at that yet.
Okay.
I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah, I have here. Look, this is through Scout 2, if you could see that.
I'll
And
say I've
I
seen the
wrote
cover
it.
art. I just haven't had a chance
Ooh.
to actually look at the book yet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. If you like that one, and everybody, I think, and it's the same thing. That one is a one shot, so it's a full story contained in like one issue, and it is that kind of. I like to describe it. It's two high school girls that are hate each other, and they're trying to get revenge on each other, and they go to very dramatic, drastic lengths in only the way that I could do it.
I get it. Something juicy, like
Yes.
drama, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. I like that.
Mhm.
You got me cleared in because
And Trigger, we're
I
waiting
don't know
on
what.
that one too. So
Oh yeah. We'll have to have you back on once we get a chance to check that
yeah,
out.
Oh,
yeah.
most definitely, most definitely. But yeah, like JJ said, the gore is very. It seems like it has a purpose, right? It's not
It's part of
because you
the
see in a
story. It's
lot of.
not at the point of the story.
Exactly. And the stories aren't like horrific just for the sake of being horrific, right? They're more they have a place in the story. And I think I like that for horror. I feel like a lot of horror there's been what can we do to just scare the audience or, jump scares, this and that. But there's actually some elegance to this. I think that's a word I can use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was a better word than tasteful.
Yeah, right. There's a certain I feel like there's an elegance to horror, yeah, but
There can be, but like there's especially with like indie comics, I get sent a lot of horror stuff that it's gore for gore's sake. Like to
Mhm.
me, that's not
Yeah.
really horror. It's not disturbing me. It's not scaring me. It's
yeah,
more grossing me out, if anything. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's not what I want from a comic book.
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
I try to tell a story first and foremost. I have to tell a story, and like hopefully it's a good story, and all that other stuff. It just comes out of it. And I like to, like I said, I like to take people to a place where it's disturbing, because like those are the ones I always feel like, even if it's a film or if it's a comic or for whatever, I feel like those linger with you more. Like you could read a
Mhm.
horror story, but if it doesn't really like get under your skin in whichever way that may be, like you may care for the character and they're in a horrible situation, it gets under your skin that way, or it's a disturbing idea that this is coming for you, whatever it is. Like I feel like those are the ones, you're like, man, that's weird, or I'm gonna keep thinking about that one.
oh, exactly. And like speaking of just thinking about it, I like how, like I said, like you took like things that are so mundane and then you made them fantastical, right? Now, if I see a spot on me, I'm gonna think about that story. You know what I'm
Right?
saying? If I see duct tape, Christmas lights, I'm gonna think about that story. Or like if my
Bottle of
wife buys a new
perfume.
perfume, yes, and then she's like, "Hey, babe, smell this perfume."
Like,
I'm gonna think of that story. So the fact that you know you were able to take that things that people encounter in their everyday lives and then put that horror twist on it, that sticks with people. That's what makes a story memorable. And yeah, I'm not gonna forget this. It's always gonna be in
Cool.
my head.
Cool. Very cool.
now, is
Thank
this
you.
a series that you see yourself like doing more issues of bite sized? Because if it's like with the anthology, you say you really like doing the, one and done stories with an anthology series, you could do that forever.
Yeah, I would love to. And I was even thinking about it because, like, these ones are short, not all of them, but they're, shorter than like your average comic story. And I was thinking, like, I guess the next one will be called Snack Size, like I don't know, because it's not the bite anymore. It's like the
Make them just a
snack.
little bit bigger
Yeah,
and
like a little bit bigger. But yeah, no, I would love to do that. Like, and I have the ideas. Like I've been, I'm thinking about like ways to push comics in a way that, like I'm trying some things to make them more interactive with you, to like
Mhm.
and I don't want to give anything away because I've never seen this done before. And I really want to, I've got this idea for a story and I actually think it's pretty solid. And like, I think it would make it interactive in a way that like comics haven't been before. So that's it. Sorry.
No, no, you're good. That's something
No,
that is
I like
missing
that.
with the comic book industry is the interactivity with the either the book or the creators.
Mhm.
That's why we started
True.
this show. Like I was running a different show for a company called Nerd Initiative for a while, and they let me kind of have free reign for a long time on just interviewing whoever I wanted. And so I stuck with indie comic book creators because you guys are the ones that don't get the mainstream press. Everybody
Mhm.
reads
Facts.
Marvel, everybody reads DC. They don't have to promote those books. They
Yeah.
sell
Yeah.
themselves, you know? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
and I appreciate that. I appreciate what you do because that's a problem that I always run into. It's like, I get jealous, honestly. You'll see some, they'll talk about this book or whatever, and you're like, oh, why don't they talk about my book just one
well, and
time?
especially if
I'd
it's
like to
something you
hear
look at, it's
theirs.
like, man, mine's better than that. Like,
I
Yeah.
didn't say
Yeah.
that, but yeah, but
but
like,
I
yeah,
feel like you have to have a little level of that ego to make it, right? I mean, you have to have that drive. Like, I know I've got a good
Yeah.
thing. I know
yeah,
it's
yeah.
good quality. I just have to get it in front of people.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and it's funny, like, I'm not Mr. Confidence, and I've always been not Mr. Confidence, but recently it is funny that I do feel better about my work where I'm like, like, and I feel like the one I was showing you, the Something Juicy story, like I've written a couple of books before that I like and I think are really good, but it's like I felt like with that story, it all kind of came together. I knew what I was trying to do and I did it. And like I feel like with the bite size, the same thing. It's like I know the story I was trying to tell and I did it. And it's like people may not like it, but like I feel like what I had inside, was in that book that you guys read, for good or bad. You know what I mean?
Mhm. But I think if you're, I mean, if you're a horror fan, you'll definitely enjoy this. I think because I think as a horror fan, that's what you look for. You
True.
want something new to be disturbed by. You want something new to freak you out because if you're a diehard horror fan, you've seen it all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I mean, I
Facts.
know guys that have seen horror flicks I've never even heard of,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'll
Yeah.
watch it. I'm like, this is insane, dude. And they're like, oh, this is nothing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
so how
and
did
I
you kinda go about, like, kinda just deciding on were there other stories that got cut that didn't make the book that you had planned out for
actually,
it, or
yeah, there was. I had originally had a final story, that and I had done the first 2, and when I sent the pitch in to Scout, they really liked it, and I was said, "Well, the 3rd one will be this," and then I was like, the 3rd one may not be this. I don't know if I like it as much," and then I came up with that B one, and I'm like, "Oh, it's that one," and went into it that way. But yeah, I hear you about I just wanted to say, going back to the horror, fans, like I am a huge horror fan and I'm like that person that you described that's probably seen everything. And it is wonderful. Like I have to say, in like as a horror fan, foremost is what I am, we will watch 100 things to find one, like
Mhm.
that's okay. Like, and they'll be terrible and we'll watch them all. And that's like, but you find that one and you're like, it was worth, the other
Worth the hunt.
99. Like,
It's like
Exactly.
yeah.
hunting for a good comic book, right? Like,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
buy
Yeah.
a bunch of random stuff off the rack that you may never have heard of before. You read 10 terrible ones, but you find that one that it's like, "This is my new favorite series now."
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Mhm.
And then you got to tell everybody, like, are you not reading this? Like, have you not heard of this or read this?
That I was pretty early on the Radiant Black train when it first started
Mhm.
coming out. I'm like, "Why is nobody freaking talking about this book?"
Uh-huh,
Like
uh-huh. And that's fun too, that process of discovery and then being able to like, show people and like, introduce them to something they haven't heard of. That's great too.
Facts. I think,
well,
and I
and
think that's what's missing, like in the comic book community
yes.
right now.
I
A
was
lot of
literally just about to
people.
say
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Like a lot of people, they want new, inventive stories. A lot of things. A lot of, especially like the bigger companies, they stick to what works, right? They stick
Mhm,
to what works for
mhm,
them, right?
mhm,
And I really think it's very honorable for indie creators to take a chance and do something a little different and like take a bet on themselves.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
think that's also like one of the reasons why we wanted to do this show because you know even in content creation, we're taking a bet on ourselves. So why not also booster up the people that are taking a bet on themselves?
Mhm, mhm.
So
And there's so many people doing comic book content online that is just Marvel and DC because they know that's what's gonna get the views.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
same thing
yeah,
with indie comic creators. I see a lot of people just doing more superhero books, more superhero books, more superhero books because they see that it sells. But I'm like, there's a lot more out there than superhero books, guys.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And I think on the positive side, right now, it's a wonderful time to be a comic creator because it's all on the table. Like whatever you want to do, whatever
mhm.
niche
mhm.
little thing you want to do, you can, and you can get it put out there and seen by people, which is, I think that's wonderful. Because
Oh yeah,
back
because
Oh yeah.
back in the day, there was much less of a chance. Like if you're like, I want to do a story about, this, then people would be like, well, that's not Batman. I'm sorry.
right.
Facts. I think it was Todd McFarlane, right? Uh, I heard him say in like an interview one time, if you're trying to like break out in comics, especially trying to get work for the big two, the Marvel and DCs of the world, he was like, don't ever go to Marvel and DC with your own idea. They're gonna shut it down. They're gonna shut
Uh-huh.
it down. He was like, when he went to Marvel and DC, he made sure that he brought some of his drawings of established characters, right? Like he's gonna show like this is how I draw Spider-Man, this is how I draw Batman, right? Because those heads at those companies, they know the difference between a good Spider-Man and a bad Spider-Man, or a good Batman, vice versa, right? And I I think that's so crazy that these companies, they're so stuck in their ways, right? That they don't want anything new, and then when they do try to do things new, they don't even push it, you know?
Mhm, mhm.
And that's one thing I don't like. So I love it. Scout Comics, they got a fan in me. Um, so
Yeah, it's funny, like, so I was at this convention and I had a guy come up and he was looking at all, the comics that I've done, and I do almost, all the covers for the books I've done. And it was really cool what he said to me. He was like looking at my stuff and he's like, "Hey, I love your stuff. I love this." He's like, "I'd like to see you do Star Wars in your style." Like the horror Star Wars. I even came
Oh,
home because
that'd be
I
pretty
was thinking
sick.
about it, and my wife was like, "Oh, that would be really cool." Like I have no idea what you will
I'll
come
say, I
up
see
with.
you got
Like,
the, is that the Darth Vader bust on the wall behind you there?
yeah, yeah. This is actually not my room. I always so this is my wife's office. Actually, my office is in a different location. Like I have all the horror stuff everywhere, but like
Right.
I'm at home. So when I'm at home, I use her office.
It just fits so well with what was being talked about.
it did, it
Yeah,
did,
yeah,
it
yeah. Oh,
did.
it totally does.
That's a good idea. Like, oh
Well,
my
because
gosh, like
they don't venture art styles very often
Yeah.
over
Oh, the
there
reason I
either
was
at
saying
Marvel and
that is
DC, like
I was going to your point about how, they don't like to branch out. They want to see their thing. And I was like, it's so funny because I think a lot of the fans would be like, man, if you took this, and you made it like this, I think they want to see something new with, all this stuff.
yes,
well, why do you think the Star Wars Visions did so well?
Hmm,
facts.
hmm.
The
Yeah.
anime style Star Wars stuff, that did gangbusters. Like, that did serious, serious numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And
So,
the
yeah.
Deadpool manga, I don't know if anybody remembers that came out last year, but the
Yes,
Deadpool manga, that sold really well too. Like, there's a hunger for different in the comic
Yeah.
book industry right now, but the big companies aren't doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
that's why
like
we're so
pulling
thankful for
teeth.
creators like you giving us stories like Bite Size because, I mean, we don't have enough unique stuff, especially like the horror genre. I hate to say it, but was feeling really stale for a long time. And here in the
Mhm.
past year or two, I see it's getting kind of a renaissance with like really good storytellers and artists.
Oh yeah.
Yourself
Yeah.
now included on that list for me.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, that's what that is my goal basically. Like I really, it's weird to have goals, but I do. Like I want to be that one, and I'm cool with being an indie creator. I'm very happy with that. I just want people to be like, I want to be the one where people say, "Hey, if you like horror, you need to read Jon Clark. Have you seen any of this stuff?"
Yes.
Like that's what I like, and that's what I like about the indie world. And like we were talking about before, like with the horror fans, like when they like something, they want people to know. And like it's like I want to be in that in that conversation. I want my name to be in that conversation.
Well, because I feel like horror in and of itself is a genre that doesn't get a lot of mainstream love anyway. And then
Yeah,
you add in on top of it horror comic books, and I imagine it's even harder to get press for that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That is true. Yeah.
Now,
And I
did you ever run this by like any other publishers that said no? Or did you end up going to Scout first and they were like, yes, let's run it?
Yeah, I'm very like loyal. If you look at my books, you'll see like I usually work with the same people like again and again and again
Hmm.
because I like that. You get good familiarity with them. But yeah, it's for this book. I didn't actually branch out. I thought of Scott and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try and see. And then yeah, they liked it and they wanted to go with it. And they responded pretty fast too. It wasn't like sometimes even other titles when I send them like a pitch and they're like couple weeks, and then they
Right.
finally say,
When they finally get around to checking their
"Okay, we'll
email.
do this one," but it was like that one fast, so I was like, "Okay, cool, let's do it."
No, it's
yeah,
awesome
man.
because it did come out right around Halloween, didn't it?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah, perfect timing.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. Oh, and another thing I do want to mention, because me and JJ, we've talked about this before. We always said that lettering can make or break a comic, and the lettering in this comic is really, really good. I
Hmm.
like the eeriness of like how the font is, and it's like stylized.
Mhm.
I like that. That also gives me kind of like the Batman Arkham Asylum, how the lettering was very unique.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, like, yeah, that's great, and shout out to April Brown, who is like I said,
Mhm.
she always does my stuff, and I've been with her since the beginning. I call her the notorious APB because her name's April Brown. But, she's wonderful, but, like, yeah, exactly. To your point, like and Arkham Asylum is the perfect example of this, is, like, I feel like that book, yes, the story is really great. Yes, the art is really great, but the lettering is so specific to the characters and to, like, what's going on in the story, so it's like I really enjoy that because it's like they went, total picture on that,
Hmm.
Yes.
like everything was meant to be that way. And I feel like, it's one of those like I said, it's one of my favorite books. And like I've analyzed it and broken it down so many times. And I'm like, why aren't other people like, doing that? Like, why aren't people thinking in that way? Like, but I think it's kind of like, it's kind of like Citizen Kane, which is considered like the greatest American film. And so when I saw that, I was a kid and I thought, what's so special about this movie? There's nothing like I've seen all this before. And then it took me like years to realize, oh, the reason I've seen all this before is because he invented it. And it's like,
Right.
I feel like as great as that movie is, filmmakers still haven't learned so many of the lessons that he knew, like what, 90 years ago or
So
however
true.
many it is now,
Hmm.
and so it's kind of like I see that like in that book. I'm like, there's so many wonderful things that people you need to learn this lesson. Like, look at this. This is amazing. Like he
Mhm.
didn't, I guess it's almost kind of like the way like the Marvel movies have made you stick to the end of the credits. It's like they've they've kind of trained the audience to like see the whole film. You know what I mean? Like it's the
Hmm.
whole thing. I don't know if any of that makes. I'm probably putting a whole bunch
No,
of
no, no,
ideas
no, no. That
No,
together
you
makes
make
here.
sense. That makes sense.
100% sense.
That makes sense. That is completely facts.
And they
And
have, like, I swear, if Marvel started doing YouTube, like like just making
Ooh,
YouTube videos, bro. They get you to watch the entire credits.
Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
Like,
yes.
I know YouTube and content creators that would kill for that kind of watch time and retention, man. Like,
Mhm,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
mhm.
it's great, and it's trickled down into other films are doing that now too,
mhm.
and you
Yes.
never even know. So it's
True.
kinda neat.
Speaking of that, Marvel has trained us because I was watching, I think it was Scream. It was one of the newer Scream movies. I think it was either 6 or 5. I can't remember. It's one of the newer ones. And at the end of the credits, the like horror movie like fan girl, she was like, "Not every movie needs an end credit scene." It did it like and I was like, the fact that it
Yeah,
said and it made that joke of it, like,
It's a complete
yeah,
running joke in Hollywood at this point.
yes,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
yes,
And you can tell that they're probably even sick of it. Some of their movies are like, I don't know, put a character over there standing there, and smiling, and then that's the end.
right, it's kinda
yes.
like the, Thor: Love and Thunder
Yeah.
end credit scene. Like, it wasn't really much. It was, Odin's mad, there's Hercules. Like
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're
but
trying to
before
get
we let you get out of here, because I don't wanna take up too much of your time tonight, where can people follow you? Do you got anything else you wanna plug? Kinda go ahead and give your sales pitch to everybody real quick.
Sure. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. So, best place to follow me is on Instagram. It's Jon Clark Comics. Pretty simple. And then, yeah, there's a couple of things. So, I made a movie years ago on video, and it is finally being released. And it's a horror movie. Surprise, surprise. And I'm very excited for that. I don't have a date yet, but it will be coming, and I will, on my site, I'll definitely let everybody know. And then I have a book, and it's one of those. It's an indie book that I really loved. Here, I'm going to bring it up. It's called Pop Up that I made, and it was through Blood Moon Comics, and like it's a 4 issue book.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you can see any of that.
Oh, yeah.
the covers, man. They're so
Yeah.
good.
And so, it's out, but we're gonna actually do a trade paperback of it. So, I think
Ah, very nice.
it comes out early next year, I think. And so, and it's one of those books, like, it's another one that I love, and I really want people to know about it. Like, I'm not Mr. Advertisement, and I'm not good at plugging stuff, but that's one that in my heart, I really enjoy. And like the concept is simple. It's called Pop Up, and it's this artist, which I don't know where that could come from, but they've never really had much success in their life, and they get this idea that they're going to bring together the world's most supernatural and cursed objects and do a traveling pop-up museum of them. And of course, the night before they open, things go horribly, horribly wrong.
I'm sold. There it is.
Right, I mean, once that's
I'm
ready, let
sold.
us know. You can come on back on the show, and we'll
Yes.
talk about that one too.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I really feel good about that one. And it's got like, if you remember like the Teddy Ruxpin from the 80s, there's like a talking doll in it, and there's like um, wax figures that move when you aren't looking. Like there's
Oh,
all
I'm
kinds of
creeped out already.
objects.
The talking doll is enough, but and then the way you got wax figures on top of it, yeah, I'm already creeped out.
Exactly.
Cool.
And then I have one last question.
Sure.
Is there if there's any bit of like advice you can give to like upcoming like creators that want to like start their own comic, any of that nature, like do you have any like advice for them?
Yeah. So, and this is what I say to my kids, and I firmly believe it. Do it. Like that's what I think. Like I can't emphasize that enough. If there's something that you want to do, the tools are so available to you right now with everything
Mhm.
that we have, from computer programs to the internet to connecting with the comic book artist. If you're just a writer, or if you're an artist, like go do it. Like that,
Oh, yeah,
that's
social media is an insanely underthought of tool for linking up with other artists and writers. Like, I tell
yeah,
people that all the time, even though I'm not an artist or a writer, but I see it work online with all the groups I'm in. Like,
yeah, yeah. I'm hesitant to say this because I'll probably get 100 emails, but I there was an artist that started following me on my page, and I just looked at their work, and I was like, I want to work with this person. I instantly sent them a message, and now we're working on a pitch for a book. So it's like, do it, like, I mean, like, that's the thing, like,
Honestly, the worst anybody can say is no, right?
That's
and
facts.
and and everybody is gonna say no, like, you just know that. So it's like, well, keep going. Like, if you already know they're gonna say no, you might as well do it anyway, you know?
Right.
It's true. True.
And
True.
like you said, the amount of tools out there now is just insane. I mean, you can publish your own stuff for free on some sites.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can self-publish, you could do a Kickstarter, you could do any of those things. Yeah,
Yeah, the
anything.
barrier to entry seems a lot lower than it ever has been.
Mhm.
That is true.
And that's
Just do it.
that's can be a good thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. 100%, because more creative people can get their ideas out there now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to hope and pray for Marvel and DC to pick up your stories anymore, you know?
Facts.
Mhm, mhm. And even with the
True.
like, people do this fan fiction, they can take those characters and go make them, and, maybe Marvel will wake up and go, "Hey, that's a great idea," you never know. It could happen.
Right.
It could definitely happen.
Crazier
That's true.
things have happened. So, I
Mhm.
mean,
That is
who
definitely
was
true.
it? Harrison Ford was a carpenter until he was what, 35, almost 40
Yep.
Mhm.
before he started acting seriously. So, I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
but anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show, John. I don't want to take up your whole night. Everybody who's watching on YouTube right now, thank you so much for hanging out with us for this entire episode. If you prefer your things audio version only, you can find this on Spotify and all major podcasting platforms tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. For you visual watchers right now, you can find the bite-sized Tales of Terror #1 at scoutcomics.com at the QR code on the screen. You can find more of Jon Clark's work at his website, which is also at the next QR code you're going to see on the screen right here. And if you'd like to help support the show and the independent comic book community grow, you can check out our sponsor, Into the AM, get 10% off your order for some awesome graphic tees. Or you can go over to the Indie Inkwell merch store and pick up a t-shirt, a hoodie, or a jacket. Thank you again very much, John, for coming on the
Thank
show.
you.
Michael, is there anything you want to say before we get out of here?
I just want to say this was a blast, man. Can't wait to have you on the show again. Can't wait to read more of your work.
Thank you.
I feel like you really have something here, and this is talent. This is talent. I've read a lot of comics in my 25, soon to be 26 years of life, right? And this, as a horror fan who grew up as a horror fan, uh, this was special. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Not a problem, man. And with that, everybody, please be safe, be kind, and take it easy. And until next time.
Peace.